Hello and welcome back to I Am Chess. I am so sorry, guys. It's literally been a year on hiatus, but I'm finally back with a new video. A lot of you have probably been wondering, who's Dean? Teach me something new about some more advanced chess stuff. I know how to control the center now, and I know how to move pieces and stuff. But today I'm gonna show you something a little bit advanced. Not advanced at all, really. It's something that every player should know how to do, and that's what we call castling. So if you've seen something like this before, don't mind the moves. They're not very good moves. It's just for example. You've seen castling before, where the king moves 2 and the rook jumps over. It's a special move, obviously. It's not a conventional move in terms of moving the pieces normally. But why is it so important? Well, let's get right into it. Well, first off, castling is really built upon you developing your pieces first. So if we were to put the number of steps in a chess hierarchy together, you probably start off with controlling the center, as we've done here. We've developed a knight. Now white is going to follow with the typical plan of moving the bishop here, right? In order to control some more space. Say black stops it, or maybe he even just copies the move. And now white has this open line here. And castling is really effective in this position because the idea, this is the Italian game, by the way, if you didn't already know, more specifically the Gioco Piano. It's just an opening, we'll get into those later. But the idea is now white is playing in a very open game. White and black, actually. This file, we call it a semi-open file because it's almost open. Well, it will become a semi-open file once these pawns come off the board. It will be a really, really, really big, important piece of the game if we can get this rook right here. Because this rook has total control over this almost, well, not almost open, but contentious file. We want rooks to be on open lines. So by castling, what we've done is we've prevented the rook from staying stagnant the whole game, because otherwise, you'd have to move this pawn, then you'd get the rook out here and through here, and then the rook would be active. But in this case, white castles immediately so that the rook can come to the center. So the idea is the next move, maybe the rook will come to the center. Let's say black does some dangerous attack and tries to attack this pawn. Well, white will come to the center and defend the pawn. Let's say black does the same thing, or he wants to do the same thing. White will then just probably look to attack or continue developing pieces, so we can probably bring our pawn here, or even our knight, because developing pieces is good. And black will do the same thing. Black wants to, at some point, control the center again. Obviously, these two pawns are important because they're center pawns, and black will eventually want to throw everything at the e pawn, e4 pawn, and white will probably want to throw everything at the e5 pawn. That might be accomplished, by somehow or eventually moving the c3 pawn up and maybe the d4 pawn up, and black might want to defend this pawn with his d6 pawn and probably move the bishop into the game and harass this knight or queen. But the whole idea is that we've castled so that our kings are safe and we continue our development. So castling is really important in this sense. Alright, and this brings us to another idea. Castling is obviously really good because it protects the king behind these pawns when the center becomes dangerous. So if the ever comes to the center, it'll rain down on the center file, and that's one of the traditional principles of classical chess. Get your king to safety. Is there any situation in which castling can be kind of dangerous? For example, we know how to castle kingside here. Let's just say black makes a move. Should white castle here? Should white castle? Now, it's possible. The king appears to be safe inside the castle, but one important idea about castling is that you have to think about king safety. The true purpose of castling is king safety. Imagine this rook comes to this file. Now, this is a situation you don't see all the time, but some players who are very aggressive will look to open these two files, the B and the G files, in order to take control of swinging the rook in. Sometimes players don't castle immediately, and they instead choose to do this so they have an extremely aggressive rook. This obviously puts the king in danger. You might end up getting hit with a lot of different attacks. So in the future, black might intend to push this pawn all the way and strike at this weak square, forcing, white to weaken his castle by moving a pawn up like this. That's just an idea, and then eventually more pawns will come and storm the castle. So this is a plan that is apparent in certain strategies. We call them openings. So most of the time you should be castling, but you do have to be careful. Castle when it's the right time. Castle early. If you castle early, you often are able to avoid positions like this and play a more traditional game where the rook is not opened. Or if you happen to spot an aggressive plan by your opponent, you might want to consider castling on the other side. So for example, let's go back to like here. In this case, white might not want to castle so quickly on the king side. Perhaps he'll want to develop his queen side pieces first, and then try something different, castling on the queen side. In this case, so let's just say black makes a funny move. In this case, white's able to castle, and his king is still safe behind another wall of pawns, right? These 3 pawns here. Eventually the king might want to move here for more safety, but the same goal has been accomplished. The rook's in the center. The rook is going to dominate one of these half-open files. And eventually, after white gets all his pieces out, he'll launch an attack in the center. Black's attack, the idea of swinging the rook here, while the rook is still able to become active, the rook can still be aggressive and try to put pressure on the queen side. It's not immediately attacking the king. So in this case, it might be a safer bet to make the other decision to castle. So not castling on the king side, which is usually safer, and castling on the queen side instead. As a player, it really depends on the position. You always want to be aware and thinking about how to protect this guy. This guy, remember, is the most important guy on the board. He is your friend. You know, he's even more than your friend. He is you. You got to think like a king. You got to think like, I got to put myself in check. Not in check. That's a horrible thing to do. Don't put yourself in check. You got to put yourself in the opposite of check, in safety. And you can do that through castling. So, as a recap, castle early. If you have a chance to castle, you should probably do it. This is a perfect time to castle. Eventually, this knight will come out, this rook will swing to the center and contest this file. White wants to do the same, and he wants to do it first. Since white has the first move advantage, white often castles first and has the power to contest first. So if you're white, you probably want to take advantage of that. If you're black, you have a little bit more leniency in terms of when you want to castle. You can delay castling, like we said about that strategy thing, where we might want to play more aggressively. As a player, it's up to you. But for the most part, you want to do the same idea of getting your king to safety. So this knight was attacking this pawn, so the rook swings over to protect it. And now black has the ability to contest this file too. So in the future, we're putting a lot of pressure on these 2 pawns, and in reality, the strategy comes from putting pressure on this whole file. One of the biggest questions about chess pieces is how to get the rook active. And let me tell you, castling is probably your best bet. So now you've got a basic idea of castling. Do it quickly, do it as part of your development strategy, get that king to safety, and afterwards, just throw everything you have at your opponent. We'll talk more about that stuff in endgame lessons and maybe in aggression lessons. If you guys want to see more ideas about breaking the castle, let me know in the comments. Until then, this is InemChess. Catch you guys next time.